I hope you enjoyed the event.
Hi, Rudy.
Talk to me back one morning. The big word is. It's very easy.
क्या एक तो पैसा फेंको जो उन पर स्माइल नहीं करता You can talk, don't worry.
I got to prototype 16, and they went to prototype 17 and launched it, but the problem was there was loads of delays with research, getting the liquid done in time, etc. So I'm now working with them with no
तू तो accountancy करते हैं हम करो
He didn't answer. Instead, they said, well, what you do is just walk around Sheffield, Leeds, Birmingham, London, Glasgow, Edinburgh, and find the whiskey pubs, go in, and my job was specifically to say, do you places at that time?
Oh, that was the whole thing, specifically point out monkey shop.
Yeah, that was going to be our competitor. And at the time, lots of places had monkey shoulder, but didn't know how to.
The bourbons after that,
Yeah,
and almost like selling it as a bourbon.
and I've seen.
And making this event possible. I'm going to introduce some of our guests, not in any particular order. I'll start, like I said, not in any particular order. So we'll start with, first of all, the two main men who are here, who basically caused this to happen. So first of all, our chairman, Bhavin Ananda, and Jay Patel, the two men responsible for this brand, chairman and managing director of Angel Share Spirits Limited, the company behind the brand. I would also like to acknowledge our esteemed guests, our shareholders. Once again, not in any particular order, we have Mr. Subir Patel, we've got Mr. Dignesh Patel, we've got Vikas Patel, and Manish Thakkar supporting us. On this table here, we've got some very, very important guests who've taken the time to make this afternoon free and come and be with us and help us understand the brand together. We've got with us Dominic Roscoe. I'm not going to speak too much on Dominic now because I've got a lot to tell you about Dominic later. But for now, Dominic is an absolute veteran where whiskey is concerned. There is nothing about spirits and whiskies that there is to know that he doesn't know already. He knows it all. We've got Herman van Broekhuizen, a very dear friend, once again a whiskey expert, a bartender, par excellence, he's a mixologist, he's done it all. He started from the ground upwards and today he's a brand ambassador, or he's been a brand ambassador for Compass Box Whiskey, Drambuie Liquor Company, John Distilleries. He's worked at events for companies like Diageo, Bacardi, William Grant and Sons, the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, and consulted a lot of private clients in the US, so I'll tell you more about him again because there will be a great opportunity to do, and he's been doing so for many years. I haven't seen very many whiskey events in London where you don't find Lavish. He's been there and he's always there for every whiskey event that happens, particularly in London, and very respected amongst the whiskey drinking community as well. We have with us Anthony Heatley, who represents Cutlass Communications, a PR firm well established in the UK. Primarily they're into PR, social media, influencer marketing and events, etc. And they've got some of the biggest clients in the UK, trust me. There is now I was going through the website yesterday and they've got all the big boys as their clients, so thank you very much. Brand, and you'll start drinking the whiskey soon. And Herman and of course Dominic will take you through the tasting of the whiskey and they'll speak more about the liquid. But before that, I thought, let me tell you a little bit more about how this entire thing happened. So without going into too much detail, I can tell you that this journey for Bhavin and Jignesh, they've been childhood friends from India, went to school together, did all the odd things that we all do as teenagers together. A lot of naughty things as well. I can't tell you on this platform today.
Why not?
Oh, these are gory details. I'll tell you about it after a drink or two. They then, they started their career. So Bhavin started his career for his uncle's tobacco company in India, where he was managing some 3,000 employees under him. but he had absolutely no interest in the business. He was gaining experience because he's generally like that. And then there was Jay Patel, who was more into photography. So he was a professional photographer from a young age and very good at his art. They moved to UK, 1997, 1998, one after the other. I think Jay moved to UK in 1997, and Bhavin followed suit soon a year later, or 6 or 8 months later, both doing whatever came their way. So Bhavin was busy dispensing medicines in some part of Norwich, and he hated his job. And Jay was still doing his photography and looking for opportunities. Things changed because both of these men, I've known them for about 3 years now. We haven't known each other for long. They're very driven. I think the difference here is that while Bhavin is the dreamer, he is the visionary in this. He's got this passion for building brands, for doing things. He's a restless soul. I think Jay, on the other side, is an evaluator. He is somebody who looks at the prospects of that business, and then together they decide whether they want to do it or not. Temple Bar, Temple Underground Station, Temple. There were too many temples in that one name, and they said, that's it, we're buying this. They did. And you know what, guess what? This turned out to be the luckiest moment of their life. Their luck sort of changed as if overnight. Everything they touched turned to gold. Jay started a chain of off-licenses, and at one time owning 15 of them, and each one doing fabulously well. While Bhavin started an online portal. First he started Angel Shake Spirits Limited, no, sorry, an Appleberry Foods Limited. And under Appleberry Foods Limited, it was just a cafe. But because, like I said, he was always looking to do something different, he saw a gap in the market and started this online website called bottlebasket.co.uk. So it was Appleberry Foods Limited trading as Bottle Basket. Guess what? Year one, they did a turnover of 1.5 million. But year two, they closed at 2.5 million. Third year, this is now the end of third year. We are sitting at just over £9 million turnover. If that isn't success, what else is? So they've done fabulously well. I think that's when the appetite grew. Now, I've been knowing both of them. Socially, we met a lot of times, but we never discussed business. As far as they were concerned, I was a friend who came, met them, we ate and drank, and they went home. I was not aware of their businesses either. Till one day, we started talking about whiskies. There was a common friend, I don't know if they remember, from next door called Jay. He came in and he started talking about whiskies, and I started speaking about the whiskies as well. And they said, how come you know so much about it? I said, because that's what I do for a living, and I've been doing this for the last 32 years. They said, really? What have you done? I said, well, to let you know that. And then they said, oh, good whiskies come from India. How many of you know this? And I said, yes, they do. I said, which one do you know? They said, Paul John. I said, yeah, I'm the one who launched it. I was the one who actually created that brand. So, that was a Friday evening. I went home. Apparently, that's what they say. They could not, particularly Bhavin, because he has these, creative worms in his body. They wouldn't let him sleep. There was that hunger suddenly. He wanted to do something with whiskey now. He didn't sleep. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, I get a call from that common friend of mine saying, they want to meet you. Okay? I wasn't sure what they want to meet me for, so I went and met them that evening. It so happens it was last year, Friday, so this coming week Friday would have been exactly a year. Met them at their office, and what came from them was, we want to develop our own catalogue of alcoholic beverages, and we want to start with the whiskey. Long story short, within the hour, everything was ironed out. We had the mechanics, all the mechanisms in place as to who's going to do what, and we got started. I came up with a name in a month's time in the Thristy Angels. A lot of apprehension. They wanted to call it Scotchman, Scotsman, or Royal Scotsman. All the names were taken. They were not settling for Thristy Angels. I said, trust me, if this was a single malt even, this would be a very nice name. It's a very catchy name to have. And I had to explain why Thristy Angels, which I'll explain to you guys as well in a second. At that stage, the name was okay, because they asked a few people and they came back and said, excellent, yeah, we've got some good reviews, let's go for this name. the brand started developing, I think, in the months. Unfortunately, we couldn't launch the whiskies in September because there's too many Asian festivals, and 90% of these sitting here are all Gujaratis, and they would miss their own wedding, but they wouldn't miss that cultural festival they have in September. They all get together and celebrate Navratri. So we decided together we're going to launch the whiskey in October. 18th of October, today we are standing in front of you, launching the brand. So first of all, a big round of applause to Bhavin and Vijay. Can I please have you by my side over here, so we can pull this bottle out of the box together.
Nipo. Come.
That's Ian Robinson. Hello. Just joined us. That's right. If you can open the box and, ladies and gentlemen, after exactly 1 year, we finally unveiled the first bottle of whiskey. Thank you, guys. Thank you. In the global drinks industry, Herman van Broekhuizen, he pronounces it Harman van Broekhuizen. He brings with him a wealth of knowledge about the world of whiskey. Born in South Africa, he moved first to Scotland, where he fell in love with the water of life as a cocktail bartender, before joining Liquid Assets Drinks Consultancy, running high-profile events and bar consultancies for the rich and famous around the world. Over the years, he has worked as a whiskey brand ambassador with Compass Box Whiskey, Drambuie Liquor Company and John Distilleries, done some events and consulting for leading companies such as Diageo, Bacardi, William Grant & Sons, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, and taught wine and spirits education for the WSET, which is the Wine and Spirits Education Trust. Please welcome a wonderful human being and an absolute whiskey expert, Herman van Broekhuizen.
Very well. Whiskey enthusiast more than expert. I don't think you're ever an expert. Always learning.
No, that's the humble Herman.
I think make sure everyone's got a dram in their glass before I start talking, and maybe I'll grab a glass as well. So when the time comes, I can join you.
That's my thoughts.
Alan? What's whiskey for?
Well, while we wait for everyone's glasses to get filled, thank you so much, Sanjay, for the introduction and the pronunciation. Beautiful pronunciation of my name. As Sanjay already mentioned, we've been friends for a long time, and we've been working together for a long time, and that's the beauty for me about whiskey. Whether it's Scotch whiskey, whether it's Indian whiskey, whiskey brings people together. Whiskey starts conversation, yeah. By the end of the day, we might be strangers to each other for now, but I feel like by the end of the day, maybe after a few drams, we're going to be best friends. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. Why don't we start talking just a little bit? I'm not going to keep it too long because I know we're all here for the whiskey, not to listen to me talk about. You're not here for a masterclass or anything like that. But what's interesting for me about this category here is this is the very category that got me into drinking whiskey. I kind of grew up in the wine world back in South Africa, and it was at age 14 that I had my very first whiskey. It was a blended whiskey. It was a 70s bottling of White Horse. Didn't cost much back in those days, but now it's quite sought after on all these auction sites, So a wonderful category, and as Sanjay already mentioned there, we actually got to work together on Paul John. I've always kind of enjoyed working for, I don't know if it's the right word, but maybe the underdog, whether it is the blended Scotch, which often gets overlooked, You know, people are always going on about the quality in single malt whiskey. Well, of course, that, you know, it's a little bit like saying all French wine are good. I think as if there's any wine lovers here will know that there's some fantastic French wines out there, but you cannot say every wine from the country of France is delicious. And so for that reason, there are really good Scotch whiskies, Indian whiskies, whiskies full stop to be found all around the world. Have the patience if you have an open mind and you're willing to try. So today, as it stands, if I have my facts right, I'm sure Dom, you will put me straight if I get anything wrong here, but almost 9 out of every 10 bottles of whiskey produced. The bottle that's left, the single malt, most of those single malts are also made by blending. And only if something was to say single cask on the front of the bottle, we know, that, of course, that it hasn't been blended. So without blending, this simply wouldn't be whiskey. And if we were to go back maybe 150 years earlier, the richest, the wealthiest, the most discerning palates out there would have been enjoying blended Scotch whisky. In fact, up until the 60s, all the best malt whiskies went into making blends. You know, the whole concept of single malt, something that potentially in the very near future we'll be releasing, is a modern thing. And so, for me, a very, very important category that should never be overlooked. And yes, of course, there are some pretty boring, insipid, blended whiskies out there. Of course, you know, especially from some very large companies, cutting costs when it comes to their quality of casks, you know, heavily colouring whiskies. Those whiskies are out there as well, but in the right hands, with enough passion, with enough skill, you can produce something absolutely outstanding. So that's a little bit on blends. But why do we blend? And again, don't worry, I'll be keeping this very short. Blending for us creates flavor, it creates complexity, it creates layering, it creates volume, it creates consistency from batch to batch. So actually, if you can hear what I'm saying there, this is not about just creating mass volume. Through blending, we can create something really, really beautiful. And as Sandra already said there, I think what makes this whiskey here today so special is that most blends out there today, we have absolutely no idea where these whiskies are sourced from. Companies are very reluctant to actually reveal their sources. And so I'm very, very excited, and this is definitely one of the reasons why I'm here, obviously because we're good friends and we've worked previously together, but I also have an incredible love for Loch Lomond as a place and for Loch Lomond Distillery. In fact, I met my partner there many years ago, and my first visit to Loch Lomond Distillery was back in 2016. There was a huge change for Loch Lomond in 2014 with a real push towards the malt category, with a much more of a focus on quality, where previously they produced huge volume. Now they were doing some really, really interesting, innovative things. And I'm going to just mention a couple of things that I learned back in 2016. I've subsequently been back there a couple of times. For me, Loch Lomond is right up there when it comes to innovation. You know, from the way they run their fermentation. You know, fermentation is a key process for flavor development. You know, often in many other distilleries you might see fermentation lasting for around 40 hours. We're talking about an average of 120 hours of fermentation, creating really long esters, which just basically means delicious fruity flavors. Really unusual stills, creating wonderful flavor profiles. They currently have about 13 different types of malt they create there. Last time I checked, including 3 different types of peatings. They malt their barley that goes through their column, their grain distillation. This is not a common practice, but at every stage of the production they try and get weight and richness and flavor into their whiskey. And I could literally go on and on. So for those of you who are going to be sticking around, by all means ask me more about Loch Lomond does that maybe makes them different from other people. But I think what you're starting to see here is that in the same way as a chef, a good chef will be looking at making food using really good quality ingredients. We've also have that same approach here. We're not trying to make this whiskey better by masking it with all sorts of additives. In fact, we start with the best grain whiskies, the best malt whiskies, and at every stage building flavor. And so when I was given a sample of this whiskey, the angels came and dropped it off to my house in East Sussex.
In a teacher's bottle.
In a teacher's bottle, duct tape closed with a sticker $6.99 on the front, I have to say. So that was really interesting. You know, the saying, don't judge a whiskey by its cover or its packaging. That was certainly the case. I was really, really surprised when Sanjay said to me, this is a whiskey that's going to be sitting sort of shoulder to shoulder with bells, with teachers, at a very affordable price point. A whiskey that obviously is there for mixing, and that's the way we enjoyed it when we came in there. We had some beautiful old fashions and some beautiful whiskey sours. I mean, we should not forget that these type of whiskies was made and is made to mix with, to do anything with, to enjoy it with ice, to enjoy it from the freezer, to enjoy it in a highball, to enjoy it in a cocktail, and as I enjoyed it, neat, you know, because why not? I think a really good quality whiskey should be able to be enjoyed in different ways. We're going to be trying this whiskey together in a moment. You do have some water on the table if you feel like you want to add a drop to it. But we're going to get our noses in there together. I'm going to suggest some stuff I pick up from the whiskey today. But you know, all our palates and all our noses are very different. So don't in any way feel like you should taste and smell what I smell. You know, that's not the way it is. But I hope you can enjoy it, and if you want to take part and get involved, by all means tell me what you... I'm much more interested to actually find out what you get from this whiskey. But I do think straight off, you know, even looking at it, I think you'll agree, an absolutely gorgeous colour, a beautiful, rich amber gold. I would say. I don't want to get too carried away with colour. Colour tells part of the story. Regionality tells part of the story. Age statements. I don't get too excited about any of those things. I'm much more interested about to begin with. And obviously, as you know, Loch Lomond Group owns Glen Scotia. As you know, they own Loch Lomond. So we're starting off with some really good quality ingredients straight away. So. Colour, I think on the nose, don't you love these big glasses? Like often you have Glencairns, it feels very serious when you have a Glencairn glass in your hand. You feel like you have to start rattling through loads of tasting notes. But now I feel like I want to go and sit down and sort of just relax with this one. It's a really nice glass, nice and chunky. But straight away I'm sort of in a fairground. There's something beautiful about whiskey, it transports you. And for me, this is taking me straight back to South Africa, and I'm reminded of this kind of smell I got from toffee apples. Fresh apple, my favorite way of eating an apple, covered in toffee. Maybe some, I don't know, you guys know the fennel sweets that you get sometimes after a meal, fennel covered in candy. Lovely vanilla notes, maybe a bit of like sort of orange and lemon peel, definitely a peppery note in there as well. I think I kind of picked up on sort of a bit of almost like a white pepper note. Definitely some floral notes in there as well, and maybe something almost a bit ashy. I don't want to say smoky, it's more of a toasty kind of a note. So really, really inviting straight away on the nose. But let's have a little taste. I think that's probably the best part, right? Let's have a little sip of this one. Welcome, Colin. Please grab it. You can have this. It's nice and warm. What do we think? Have you all had a little sip? Everyone's got a glass? Colin, can I pour one for yourself? If I can find, yes. Oh, we don't want any empty hands. You guys are very quiet. Everyone's very quiet. I hope this is good. Silence is good, right?
Yes.
On the palate, I think you'll agree it's a nice clean whiskey. Hopefully there's nothing that's floating around there. It should be nice and clean. I think that apple note, that kind of toffee apple note really for me has come back again.
You smell toffee?
Really like apple, kind of pear, kind of toffee caramel note. Zestiness. Lovely spicy kind of notes in there as well. Maybe a bit of like nutmeggy kind of note from me in there. A bit more pepper. What I'm also really quite impressed with is there's a really nice texture and weight in this. You know, that's something that's often overlooked, I think, in wine and whiskey. But I do find like there's a lovely coat that I'm going to get over my palate. It really kind of flows all over my tongue, around my cheeks. And that's the way I often try to taste my whiskies as well. Just as a little, I know you're all sort of seasoned whiskey drinkers here, but try washing it around your mouth a little bit and working it around your cheeks and really getting everything involved, everything. I think that's a really nice way of tasting it. Maybe even chewing on it a little bit. You know, a lot of time and effort went into making this whiskey, so you might as well give it some time. You know, this whiskey nothing happens fast in the world of whiskey, and often we rush through our drams. I think it deserves the time and effort that went into making it. So, I think it's a wonderful whiskey to have on its own. In terms of like the kind of finish, I think again more of that kind of honey, that vanilla notes, that kind of butterscotch notes, nice bit of fruit, nice floral note. Again, I'm getting that ashy kind of like, I don't want to say peat, but I think more of a toasty kind of a note I get on there. A really wonderful whiskey. I mean, in fact, it's still lingering, which is a good sign. Personally, I don't mind. A whiskey does not have to hang about for hours afterwards, as long as it's enjoyable while it's actually on your palate. But this does actually keep going. So I think quite the achievement, and I think it deserves another applause. Well done, gentlemen. An absolutely wonderful achievement here. And I'm sure over the space of the evening, Sanjay is going to potentially share with you some more upcoming news. Maybe a few teasers of things coming up next year. But really, really excited to be involved in these early stages. And I know a lot of work has obviously gone into this in the years leading up to tonight. So well done. And I'll be around for the rest of the evening. So any questions, please come up to me. I love talking about whiskey. So, cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, we had two more guests join us. I've got to also introduce you to them. We've got Sir Colin Hampton-White, who is a non-executive director at the Cask Trade Limited and chair of the Circle of Wine Traders. He's also a television presenter on the Three Drinkers TV show on Amazon Prime, former editor of the Whiskey Quarterly, former managing editor of the Still Novisti Whiskey magazine. I pronounced that correctly. And also, amazingly, he's also a freelance photographer and journalist, whereby he continues to photograph and write for Condé Nast and Lux. Please welcome with a big round of applause. And we also have with us Ian Robinson, who joined us about 15 minutes ago. Ian represents Posh Scotch, like I mentioned. His social media handle, Whiskey Taster. Which is Posh Scotch is his social media handle. He's a whiskey taster, reviewer. He's also a brand ambassador for the Whiskey Baron, an independent bottle of fine whiskey. He's equally passionate about photography and is an amazing photographer. I've seen his work; it's amazing. So, big round of applause for. Yes, Herman did mention that we've got some great plans going forward. First of all, still talking about the whiskey. Yes, you're right. We came in at a price point of, for the retail at 19.99 deliberately. A lot of people ask me that you can get teachers for about £19, maybe 18.59, are you a pound there? And I said, you know what? First of all, who is this whiskey for? It's for the working class person, a typical working class person. And this becomes a great whiskey where you feel like rewarding yourself.
That's bear with me. Takes a little while for my right leg to work. No, that's fine. I'll shout if I need one. Hello. Firstly, can I just say thank you to Sanjay and to this restaurant. This is a fabulous place to do an event, and I feel very spoilt today, so thanks to that. Secondly, I apologise for my throat. That's from shouting at Leicester City too much. If you're a football fan, you'll know why. But I'm season ticket holder there, and unfortunately it wasn't great at the weekend, and we told them. A lot of what I was going to talk about has been covered, but I just want to say a little bit more about the blended whisky sector. Before I do, I'd just like to say I tried this for the first time today, and it's amazing. It actually, you're quite right, it coats the mouth and it stays like you would expect a single malt to. And that's a really good starting point, because there are a lot of people quite snobby about blended whiskies. They assume that because they're common and because they're sold all over the world and they are 90% of the industry, they're not as good as single malts. But actually, as Herman pointed out, the word single means from one distillery. It doesn't mean one cask. So a single malt whisky is actually a marriage of lots of casks. And that process isn't a million miles. I might just take a chair actually. It's not a million miles from... Thank you. Thank you. So the process of making a single malt whisky isn't a million miles away from making a blended whisky. And in actual fact, if you think about it, blended whiskies are even more complex, because you're taking different single malts from different distilleries with different taste profiles, and you're marrying them with a different style of whisky, which is grain whisky. And all of that has to be brought together to create something that is of a quality that you can sell and represent. And it was described to me like being in an orchestra. A great blended whisky is like an orchestra. It's got lots of instruments. A single malt whisky is a violin or a guitar, but a blended whisky is a marriage of all the instruments to make a perfect and harmonious sound. So the skill that goes into that is actually quite high, or very high. The second thing is that blended whiskies can be as complex, aged and mixed as any single malt can. There are very, very good quality blended whiskies, and they cost a lot of money. And so the attitude of people to say the standard blend isn't as good as single malt isn't necessarily correct. It is true that you find very dark coloured blended whiskies in corner shops, and they cost about £11, and they are made up mainly of grain and coloured with artificial colouring, and they're not great, as Herman was saying. But when you start seeing the skill done properly, unfortunately some of us in this room have, you start to realise what geniuses these people are making these whiskies. The other thing I'd say is that there's a generational thing that's happened, I think. My father was a whiskey drinker, but he would have drank in the 60s, he would have drank Johnny Walker. I remember putting my finger in my mother's whiskey and it tasted of peat, but I could only assume in the 60s it was Johnny Walker. Our generation didn't do that. I'm 61 and our generation didn't do that. Our generation did vodka and lime or rum and coke, if we did anything at all apart from beer. But there's another generation coming through now discovering whiskey for themselves. We're exceptions. Oh, I'm an exception because I became a whiskey writer, so that's why whiskey has been part of my life. But it's not common necessarily for people my age to drink a lot of whiskey. But my son's generation, he's 24, my eldest son is 24, he is discovering whiskey through the internet, through social media, through conversations. and they're discovering it for themselves and what they're interested in. And I was really interested to hear Sanjay talk about mixing Scotch with world whisky, because I've got a real thing about this. I think this is one of the great things for the future, that we can now start playing with blends and we can start doing innovative things. What this generation wants is not a long story about the barrel and how it's made, or the history of malting, and they don't want that. They talk about taste all the time. So if you can find a way of making a great tasting whiskey, it doesn't really matter what the price point is, it doesn't really matter how it's done, that generation will see it for what it is. And this is exceptional. I tasted it first time. I get your apple, toffee apple thing, but I also get a lot of orange. And that spice, there's a spiciness in there as well, which it was much different to what I thought it was. And that's the final thing I was going to mention about blends, is that, okay, if you take a bottle of Teachers, and as rightly pointed out, and to judge all blends by the bottle of Teachers, and I'm not against Teachers, it's got quite a rough, peaty flavour that I quite enjoy, to be honest, or Bell's, or any of those cheaper blends, they taste very different. And they taste very different because they're using malts from different sources. So if you're able to make a good quality blend like this one is here, then there will be a market for it. So I think we're in a very great position. I write about world whisky, exciting. Australia and New Zealand have combined a whisky together. Scotland and Ireland did, but the Scotch Whisky Association didn't like it. But we're not bound by those rules. We're outside Scotland's rules, and especially now that we're not even in Europe anymore. But all those countries, India and Japan, Australia, Taiwan, they're all in a position to start playing games and saying, well, why can't we mix two different countries? Why can't we do this? And I think that's the way it's going to go. And I'm also of the belief that Scotland knows it too. I'm not anti-Scottish in the slightest. But Scotland is allowing far more leniency, or the Scottish Whisky Association is, far more leniency in terms of what they're permitting. They've increased the range of different barrels that you can use, for instance. And they seem to be accepting that people are going to do innovative things that are completely within the rules, but have just never been done. So we're on the brink of something very exciting, and I'm going to watch this journey with a lot of interest, because I think this is a great starting point, but if you've got unusual stuff coming in the future, it's going to be very, very exciting indeed.
You'll know about it first.
Hmm?
I said you'll know. You'll be the first one.
Thank you, Sanjay, that's great. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you're having a lovely evening. And yeah, I'm here. I have to rush off fairly quickly after the meal, but I'm here if anybody wants to chat about anything. Yeah. Thank
Dinner in an Indian restaurant.
I'm going to try to do it.
What's his name?
I get what's happening at the minute, and I'm kind of fully
And he seems to be loving it.
Yeah.
Good brand.
Sir, would you like some white wine?
But also, I've been very sorry to
Yes, good meeting. Hello. Don't make me lose.
I'm so sorry. Thank you.
I said no, man, I'm only.
You go to a bar, and
Give my bell the wine again.
they have a shield. And it's like, oh,
I've got some. Thank you very much.
lovely. Yeah, I was staying at a hotel.
Wow.
And I got very like
Ah, sí, mate. I got everything right.
So I'm not in a rush at all. The idea was I was going to get a
অমিত কেমন আয় তো સાડું ચાવડા
I don't know how you managed to do it, but if you can produce it and still make money, then I genuinely have a lot of love for that place. Yeah, I really love it. I mean, it's incredibly immersive. The fact they do, what you see at Loch Lomond, you do not see in Scotland. You can't quite hang around now, it's just beautiful, you know. Because I was staying, I got back yesterday, so I was on the space side.
You say you don't
कुडू कुडू करे ऐसे कुछ अपन फोटा तो निकलता नहीं
And that's just the last drop, didn't they?
તમારા તો મને આવી ગયા
He has a very interesting.
જેનો વાયદો કરો એ પૂરો કરો બીજો કોઈને વાયદો ના કરો
કરવો જ નહીં
ના મજા આવી બહુ પ્લાન્ટ છે
No colour. It's the last time I was raised, you said, oh, I think it's probably 18 months ago.
પાણી નહીં વિસ્કીની વાત કરે છે હવે
Yeah, but a mini box. Mostly, I mean, really, they want to be around it. It is inside for us. It's for hours.
પ્લસ સાઇઝ મારી 46 કેવા કપડા છે ડિઝાઇનર કપડા હતા ને ઓન્લી ટ્રાઉઝર્સ લોન આ બધે હતી મળતા યાર નહીં મળતા
इनको देना मेरे को नहीं देना
સ્ક્રિપ્ટો લખું છું એટલે દિવસે ના આવી પડ્યો અચાનક સ્ક્રિપ્ટો લખી લઉં
Of course it is. friendly, but I also think
Maybe it's good for me to know as well. So the plan with things was
you know, and that's what I really get off on. You know, I reckon if I spend half a day walking through it, and we were told we needed 5 stories a day, and where'd you get them from? PR? Who wanted you to write them? Where's your story in that? I argue Watergate wouldn't happen today.
yeah, perfect.
It's good, or maybe have a soda water, but it's going to take a bit of time.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, it has to be. Yeah, it has to be. This is so different.
It's more affordable. Yeah, of course.
Okay, that's fine.